And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. You're tuned in to Tapped Out. Hosted by Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine. Only on the BetQL Network.
And welcome into Tapped Out. We appreciate you checking us out. However you got us on YouTube, on the Odyssey app, on the BetQL Network. That there, Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. And my guy, we got a lot to talk about, right? We got UFC 295 coming up on Saturday night. Not the main event we thought it was going to be, right? We don't get John Jones or Stipe Miocic, but I think we might have a better fight, and I know exactly how it's going down. We'll talk about that coming up in a little while, but Dana White made a bunch of big announcements this week. He gave us our main event for 297, 298, and 299. So at this point, we're pretty much set up to UFC 300. Let's start with the main event of UFC 297, Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis. I remember asking you a couple of weeks ago, before we know who Strickland's opponent's going to be, do you think he defends his belt? And you were kind of wishy-washy. Now we know it's Dricus du Plessis. What are your early thoughts on that fight?
It's man, first of all, it's a good fight. I mean, Dricus definitely deserves his title shot because everybody thought that initially he was going to be the guy who took on Izzy, and that was going to be a fun matchup. So I don't really have any quarrels with him getting the shot right now. I mean, in the early leans on it, he is a slight dog at like plus 135 in the early goings of things. Sean's minus 155. I think that sounds about right, just because I think Sean's reputation right now is probably as high as it's been because of the way he dominated Israel Adesanya. I think that's probably about right. I think I would favor him in this matchup just because Dricus, as impressive as he looked in his last fight and how impressive he's looked in his fights, especially against Robert Whittaker, it's just a matter of, all right, Sean is kind of this enigma right now of like, can people figure out his style that's very straightforward, but also kind of unorthodox because nobody fights like him. And can Dricus, keep this power move that he's got going? Can he keep that rolling against a guy like Sean Strickland? Because it looks right now like he's been very hard to figure out.
You mentioned, BT, both guys coming in off of probably their biggest wins. Which impressed you more? The way that Dricus was able to piece up and finish Robert Whittaker, or, I mean, nobody dominates Israel Adesanya. We haven't really seen that happen in a 5-round fight. And Sean Strickland, man, I would say took 4 of those 5 rounds. They both looked awesome the last time out.
Yeah, I gotta go with Sean Strickland's performance against Israel Adesanya, just because we had never seen him over 5 rounds. I mean, we've seen Robert Whittaker finished by Israel Adesanya, so I don't want to take too much away from DDP because it was great, but Sean's is more impressive for sure.
Do you think that Sean just fought a perfect fight that night against Izzy, or do you think that's really who Sean Strickland is? Because the truth is, it's almost, maybe it's not like George Masvidal, maybe not the best example, but he was kind of a journeyman who got close a couple of times. And, he's been in the promotion for a long time. He was Tarzan with the long hair like a decade ago. Everybody forgets that he fought Usman way back in the day, right? These things happened. But now is he just turned into the fighter that he was always supposed to be? Or did he just have a perfect fight against Adesanya? Because from my perspective, I got to see it again. And I'm a Sean Strickland guy. Since we've been doing this show, I love Sean Strickland. Friend of the show. He came on. He had fun with us. But I never thought he was a champion. So I want to see him do it again, especially against du Plessis.
It's interesting because, Sean having this mantle, we always wonder about like how our guy's going to take that run of confidence of being the champion. And, in this sport, I don't think it's ever been crazier of seeing what we think is going to happen and the opposite happening. It's been wild. It's been wild seeing all the titles change hands. And DDP has been on an absolute tear, and he's looked like a guy who was going to be on this path to getting a title shot. It is just a matter with Sean. It's a bit of a different fight. I mean, it's not like, you're not taking on a guy who's as, crafty and elusive. And I think you have a guy who's going to probably come forward a little bit more in Dricus du Plessis. So it will be interesting. I mean, we've also seen Sean, pretty recently lose, although it was a close fight to Jared Cannonier. So it's not like he's been this perfect fighter either. We just saw him get knocked out against Alex Pereira too. So he's had his own recent struggles also. It's just that when it was looking like the odds literally were the most stacked against him, he probably had his best performance. So it's a wonder of, is he going to carry that momentum, or is he this kind of up and down guy? It's tough to know because with Dricus, he's kind of just been on a roll as of late, is coming off of an injury. So you do want to wonder if there's any ramifications with that as well.
All good points, especially if you're going to lay down your hard-earned money on this fight. My early lean is Sean Strickland, but we've got a little while till he fights Dricus du Plessis in the main event of UFC 297. Brendan Tobin, Sports Machine Sean Levine, breaking it down for you here on Tapped Out. For what it's worth, you're talking about the champions in the UFC. Sean Strickland, that's crazy. Sean O'Malley, that's crazy. 296 is coming up after this one. That's Leon Edwards, friend of the show, taking on Colby Covington. And if Colby wins, I mean, then Colby's champion. The funny thing is, now that I say it out loud, I feel like the UFC's loving this. They needed some new blood. You might as well get the smack talkers up at the top.
Yeah, I don't think any of that stuff is bad. I think, you know, we've been talking about the Sean O'Malley train for a long time. For him to be on top, I think that's probably got to be their biggest golden goose right now, especially with John Jones being hurt. I do think that Sean Strickland is almost it's funny how he's kind of had this babyface turn as champion. I think everybody kind of likes the realness of him when he was kind of a little bit more outlandish when he was on the up and up and not really getting that spotlight. And yeah, if Colby gets it, that's certainly going to be interesting too. But Colby's a really, look, you know, Colby, I think in a lot of other weight classes probably would have been champion. It's just it was one that was reigned over by Kamaru Usman, who's damn good too. So there's no reason to think that he's not good enough to go get this done against Leon. But Leon is one of the most heartfelt stories too. Like, I think everybody, I mean, who didn't love his win and getting to see the backstory of his rise as well. So, you know, so many of these guys are great. They have, you know, we've had a ton of them join the show, and they're awesome personalities, and it's easy to root for. And seeing the rise of a champion is one of the coolest things of the sport.
Back up just a little bit, because it was this time about a year ago that we were having a conversation. Is Jorge Masvidal the most popular fighter in the promotion? Is Sean O'Malley right on his heels? And I said yes, and O'Malley caught wind of it, and O'Malley tweeted, called you the fat guy on the left, said you were stupid, something like that. I don't want to take words out of his mouth. I like to quote people directly. Did I hear you say like a minute and a half ago, real time, that Sean O'Malley is now the UFC cash cow? So he's the guy now in your eyes.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, look, man, my whole point of it was that he just hasn't done it yet. Like Jorge Masvidal,
that's fair.
Up to that point, I mean, that was even before Jorge sold out Miami, and Miami was the highest gate that is non-Vegas ever. Even did topped MSG. So I don't think that my point was wrong on Jorge's popularity, but I do think that, look, he's retired now. He's obviously suffered a lot of losses in a row. He's beefing with Chael Sonnen this week after he gets his case dropped, or whatever he did. He plead out against Colby Covington, and yeah, Sean's on the up and up right now, getting ready for his rematch.
Our legal terms may or may not be accurate on this show. Yeah, Chael was in it with a lot of people, with Ariel a little bit, got into it with Masvidal. He Uncle Chael was still undefeated. You know how that goes. All right, let's talk about UFC 298. We just saw Alexander Volkanovski get knocked out. I'm surprised that he's turning it around. I guess it's not that quick. What's that going to be? 1, 2, 3+ months at UFC 298, taking on Ilia Topuria. Topuria's a killer, man. And here's the thing. I think Volk takes him out. I haven't seen the odds for it. Maybe you got him. Something tells me Volk's a somewhat heavy favorite. All that being said, man, the last time out, he got knocked out violently, right? I mean, one shot, done. And sometimes you're a different fighter after that and need a little bit of time to recuperate. Maybe you need an easier fight before that. This is going right back into the fire pit at UFC 298. Before I hear what the line is, I kind of think Ilia Topuria is in a good spot here.
Yeah, right now, Topuria is plus 200 as they open up this week.
That's tasty.
And it's hold on one second. Is that this might be old. Let me get these updated.
Here's the thing while you're looking for it.
Yeah,
I could have never imagined that Alexander Volkanovski could get finished, because I saw Brian Ortega squeeze as hard as he could, and 2, get knocked out. I didn't think it was possible. I thought it was like knocking out a fire engine. Now that he has, maybe Ilia Topuria can do it. What do you got?
Well, excuse me. So I was giving you odds from September, but they have gone down. So I do think that a lot of people are having those same concerns, because the odds I was looking at Topuria was plus 200. Right now, Ilia Topuria, as of yesterday, plus 156. Alexander Volkanovski minus 181. So Alexander Volkanovski back a few months ago before the knockout loss was around a minus 240. in this fight. And so, yeah, there has been some swing, and I think people do share those same concerns. Topuria is a beast. And when you see, what you thought was not possible, which is Volkanovski getting finished, and then it happens, and especially as violent as it happened, it's impossible not to think, how is the effect? What are the ramifications of that going to be? Because Topuria has looked like an absolute monster.
What did you say it is right now to give up on Volk? I knew I was going to have to give up some money.
He is minus 181.
I can pay that. As much good stuff as I was saying about Ilia Topuria and how, Volk's coming in off a knockout and all that, I think I'm willing to pay minus 181 to win 100. We're still talking about one of the best fighters of our generation. And also, this is a big fight for him because he doesn't want to be the guy that loses back-to-back fights. Because once you lose back-to-back fights, your confidence wanes. People start talking about you. Are you still at your championship level? Are you a completely different fighter? Losing one happens to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Losing two, I think, completely changes at least our opinion at the time. I'm not saying long-term, all-time Volkanovski. He's already cemented his spot. I'm just saying right now, pound for pound. Anyway, let's move on. UFC 299, Sean O'Malley versus Chito Vera. Before we get too far into this thing, does it feel like Chito is just getting this shot because it's the easiest of all the options for O'Malley? I was thinking about it. Like, they don't want to give him Corey Sandhagen for his first title defense. They don't want to give him a healthy Aljamain Sterling for his first title defense because there's a pretty good chance that Sean loses the belt, and they want Sean to keep the belt. Now, I know that you could say, well, remember, dude, Chito Vera beat him. I get it. I think both guys are very different fighters since then. And I would say Chito's in a weird spot where at one point, like if Chito was a graph, when he beat O'Malley, let's say he was on an even plane. Then he was shot up. He was awesome. And then his last couple of fights, I know he's coming off the win, but think about where he got dominated against Sandhagen. He's almost plateaued, if that makes sense, while O'Malley's completely skyrocketed. So they're different fighters at this point. I just think the UFC wants O'Malley to win. That's why he's fighting Chito at 299.
Yeah, I think what they don't want is for O'Malley to go out there against somebody like Merab and get ragdolled. And they don't want something boring like that to happen because, yeah, you do want Sean O'Malley in exciting fights. These guys do, to be fair, these guys have natural heat with each other because of Chito having the win, banged up as O'Malley was in that fight or whatever. The win is the win. And that's what's on the record, even though Sean was going around forever and saying, I was still undefeated. He was kind of pulling the Chael Sonnen. So it's not a boring fight. I mean, like, look, you have an absolute knockout artist in Chito Vera against a guy in Sean O'Malley who's as slick as they come, and is hoping that, yeah, he could put a few more of those on his resume. It's an interesting fight for me just because, I do think that Chito, let's just say it, he ain't going to win a decision against him. He's got to finish him. And but the thing that you got to like about Chito is if you're going to bet on him is he's live at that because he basically goes into every fight, basically trying to get the knockout. He is not a guy who tries to win decisions. So he's used to this. He's got 5 rounds to do it. He's typically a slow starter. It's just a matter of, do you think that he can pull it off? This might be one of those where maybe I'm not the ice cream man like you, where I like to sprinkle a little on everything, but this might be one of those where like, you just maybe sprinkle a little on like a Chito Vera knockout at some point just to see what that is, just because, just to keep yourself safe. But it feels like, yeah, O'Malley could win by knockout, probably will win that by decision because Chito is hard to finish. But, you always got to be wary of Chito because he can hit that head kick. He can hit something vicious. We have seen Sean get banged up in fights before. But yeah, I agree with you mostly that this is the safer route. It does feel like a guy who is tailor-made for him, even though he's beaten him before. Sean is a more mature fighter now. We have seen a Chito who's had some struggles in the octagon, even if he hasn't pulled off, even if it hasn't all just been losses. It's been like you watch him and you're like, when is he going to get out of first gear? When is he going to get going? And that could be tough against a guy like Sean O'Malley.
The Ice Cream Man is such a great nickname. Why did I go with the Sports Machine, Sean Levine? How corny is that? I could have been 2 scoops. I could have been the Ice Cream Man. That's Brendan Tobin. I'm the Sports Machine, Sean Levine. Coming up next, we step in the octagon and fight each other one-on-one. It's You Gonna Fight Me on Tapped Out.
It's time to duel. where Sean Levine will step into the cage with Brendan Tobin in Are You Gonna Fight Me?
I'm gonna fight your ass.
Here on Tapped Out.
That's right, fight me like a man.
Only on the BetQL network.
You know the rules. I want a good, clean fight. When I tell you to break, I want you to step back up my command and break. Now go back to the corner and come out fighting at the bell.
Welcome back into Tapped Out on your radio, on the BetQL network, perhaps on YouTube, on the Odyssey app. I don't care how you got me. Glad to see you. Brendan, Sean, time to fight each other. Ding, ding, ding. I don't think that we ever see John Jones in the UFC again. You going to fight me? I mean, what does he have to gain at this point? I think he's done.
I'm going to fight you. I just think that Stipe fight's just too juicy for them not to do it. I don't even care if it's for the belt or not, really. I just think that it's so rare in the sport that you get a historic matchup like that. Stipe ain't going anywhere, right? Like he's just hanging, doing his firehouse thing, whatever. You'll call him up, he'll be ready to go. So I think that'll be the one he comes back for. I don't think he's going to come back and fight whoever wins the main event of MSG. Or the co-main event of MSG. I don't think he's going to do that. I think that John is still going to want to fight the legacy fight. I don't think he has anything to prove against Aspinall or Pavlovich, but I do think that Stipe fight means something to John Jones. I think it means a little bit to the legacy of the fan. I don't know if they instead of a BMF belt, put a goat belt on the line. I don't know what you want to do, dude. But like, I need to see that fight. And I think that he'll come back for that one.
I disagree. I do agree when you said he doesn't want to fight the winner or won't fight the winner of Aspinall and Sergey Pavlovich, only because why? There's a pretty good chance that the younger lion, one of those guys, whoever wins that fight, would take out John Jones. And then you lost to a guy who's not a big name, might be the last fight of your career. People consider you undefeated. I agree. If he does come back, it would be against Stipe. How old is Stipe Miocic, BT? He's like 42 years old. John's getting old too. How long, like you say, he's going to be at the firehouse and he's waiting on the fight? When do we get into the Pacquiao-Mayweather territory where it's like, all right, one of them comes out with a walker and one of them comes out with a wheelchair? Like, if they don't fight the next year, I got to be honest with you, I don't give a damn.
Oh, we're getting close. We're definitely getting close, but I think it's got kind of that, kind of got that Connor to Nate thing. First of all, I think as UFC fans, MMA fans, we're used to seeing the old guys. We'll peek in on the freak show. We'll watch Fedor fight till the sun sets. We'll watch Chael fight. We'll watch Tito chuck 3 on an Oscar De La Hoya card. We'll watch the freak show in this sport. And I do think that, John coming off injury, he's not ancient. He'll be 36, 37. So that's not terrible. Stipe is going to be 42 in August. So, it's not a terrible, he's already old. It's not like you're going to 41, 42. What's the difference at that point? So I'm not super against it. I'll give it a little bit more time, but with John, the question's always going to be, how is he going to handle being out of the cage and not having camps and having to do rehab? Is he going to handle that okay? Is there going to be distractions? What is going to be the case there? So that's what I'd be more worried about, more so than motivation or anything like that.
Speaking of heavyweights, now that we are a little bit removed from Ngannou versus Fury, and you and I both think that Francis Ngannou won that fight, I watched it again. I was like, did I miss something? I don't even really think that it was that close. Do you agree that at this point, Francis Ngannou, any organization on the planet, he could beat that guy up? I'm talking boxing. I'm talking UFC. I'm talking any organization. I think the only guy that could even come close at this point is whoever wins the Aspinall Sergey Pavlovich fight. And I'd love to see it, but it's probably not going to happen. You going to fight for any of that?
I definitely think there are people who could beat Francis Ngannou in MMA. I think that John, I'd still bet on John Jones against him. I mean, maybe the injury puts a little bit of a damper on that, but I'd still pick John Jones if I had to bet. I'd be curious to see what the line would look like on that. But, Pavlovich, definitely interesting. Aspinall's got some weapons. I don't think that it's mixed martial arts is so crazy. I don't rule it out. Boxing, I am curious, like if Tyson Fury fought him again and actually looked like he tried to train for it, would he fight a lot better? Probably. But I think Wilder, Anthony Joshua, guys who are chinny don't necessarily have the slick skills that Tyson Fury does, yeah, I think he could give those guys a little bit of a run. And why not? He's shown that he could handle it with the Gypsy King. I think that he could give those guys some trouble.
As the boxing expert out of the two of us, I'm a little bit surprised to hear you say that somebody could beat Ngannou, only because I remember when he took it to the ground with Cyril Gane, and you were like, okay, he can wrestle a little bit. We knew that he had the knockout power. He was a really good boxer. Say what you will about Tyson Fury not showing up that night. I mean, good head movement, good feet, the jab kept him at distance, everything that you want. I think that Francis Ngannou was just morphed into a really good mixed martial artist and not just a big ass scary looking dude.
He's awesome. I mean, like, look, he's and just one of the easiest people to root for too, just because he had a lot of people doubt him, scoff at him, say he was making a huge mistake, and he is, I mean, just come up roses on all of it. But yeah, I think that there, if you were to tell me, like, if Francis was back in the UFC, would Francis go undefeated through all of these guys? I'd say probably odds are somebody gets him. In boxing, I think that, the two power punchers in Wilder and Joshua, I think you could probably get those guys maybe in a certain. I think they'll take him a lot more seriously than Tyson did. But yeah, man, I mean, like, look, I'll say this: he's live against anybody. I don't think it's like unfathomable that he beats everybody. Or that he can't lose, but he definitely has a chance against anybody. You cannot rule him out.
Speaking of Tom Aspinall, he said that his upcoming opponent, Sergey Pavlovich, is the scariest guy in the UFC right now. I think I agree. Maybe Alex Pereira. I wouldn't want to run into him in an alley. You gonna fight me?
Nobody, look, dude. I don't trust this Pavlovich. All right, he tries to look all cute walking around these South Florida streets in his fancy ass shirts. I know that he's the most destructive thing on the planet. I think, like, I honestly, like, if you told me, like, if you could watch like him versus Francis, that's like a comic book movie. That would be amazing. And that's saying that I think Aspinall could still win. Like, Aspinall definitely has a shot in this fight. It's just like, look at them. They're two, Russian freak versus, the Predator. Like, it's crazy. Man, who's scarier than him, pound for pound? I don't know, man. I think he's right. You probably nailed it with Pereira. Middleweight, like, I don't, Sean's good. I don't know if I necessarily say Sean Strickland's the scariest guy on the planet.
He's not scary.
Yeah, like, I don't
even O'Malley's not scary at all. Like, every time he dresses up and does his nails and his hair and all that stuff, I'm like, I cannot believe that this guy can also beat up almost everybody on planet Earth. Like, but I think it's great for the UFC. Like we were talking about earlier, I think that ultimately they've got a lot of the champions that they would have handpicked. Speaking of South Florida, Dustin Poirier says that the UFC asked him to fight Islam on short notice and then pulled back and gave that fight to Volk. You're going to fight me if I say probably good for Dustin, because I think he would have got finished too against Islam.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, he's also coming off a very vicious loss to Justin Gaethje. I think that would have been a fun fight too, just because, like, if you were looking, I think it, like, I don't blame the UFC for going with the Volkanovski option, because obviously that's the fight everybody wanted to see. But if Dustin, the way he says it is they asked him first, he said yes. And then they just never got back to him, I guess, because the Volk thing is going. The thing that's interesting for me is I think it would have been a good enough fight to save the main event just because of Dustin's credibility. I wonder if there's a little regret from the UFC for putting Volkanovski out there so quickly, because it didn't have the buildup, that this was, such an all-time weight class fight. Probably could have headlined UFC 300 if you wanted to. And instead they kind of just did it on short notice, put one of their great champions out there on 10 days notice and got head kicked. So
you might be right. You might be right at this point. I mean, in hindsight, they're probably like, damn it, that wasn't how that was supposed to go down. So, by the way, speaking of UFC 300 coming up in a little while, I've come up with my UFC 300 dream card, because we're getting there, people. We're probably only a handful of months away. And I figured out a way to get Dustin Poirier on that card. So maybe he didn't get this fight, but I do think that he's part of that main card at UFC 300. We'll get there coming up in a little while. on Tapped Out. Speaking of coming up in a little while, after UFC 295 on Saturday is 296 main event, Leon versus Colby. I know how it's going to finish. You going to fight me? Colby wins by decision.
No, I'm not going to fight you on that. I think that's a very solid pick. I don't know what the odds are going to end up being that week for Colby by decision, but I think that's a pretty good prop to take because he's exhausting. The only thing that's got to give you, Leon did show some great takedown defense against Kamaru. I mean, he did have to grab the fence illegally one time in their last fight.
Sure.
But Colby's different. Colby's a different type of grappler. He'll pick you up, he'll put you down and hit you with a lot of strikes coming in. So I think always in that case, it's a smart bet to go with the guy who seems like he's got a great wrestling advantage. Colby never gets tired. He's always just nonstop action. He's exhausting to take on. So for all everybody says about how annoying he is with his talking, I mean, the dude is a damn good fighter.
And if he does get that belt, he's going to have it for a while because he doesn't fight that often. So
no,
he could have that belt for a few years and only have a few title defenses. UFC releasing some of the ladies. Hey, ladies, Tyler Santos is out. Mayra Bueno Silva is out. You're going to fight me if I say the women's division, all of them, they need some stars, dude. No Ronda, no Misha, no Joanna Jacek that we've had the last few years, right? Yeah, Rose is still there and Holly's still there, but they're really no longer the draws that they were. At this point, it's pretty much just Zhang Wei Li, right? Like, what else do we got right now? You're going to fight me if I say they better do something on the women's side.
Yeah, not going to fight. They announced the title fight this week. I was like, huh? What? I was like,
yeah, me too. What was it? It was Pennington.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, okay. And I apologize for my ignorance on it, but I think no, I did. I was like, I apologize, but it's one of those where I was like, really? Okay. Good for them. But
are you gonna give it to me? Rocky Pennington and who is
it? It was UFC 297. It's let's see. It's UFC 297. Mario Bueno Silva, Rocky Pennington on ESPN Plus pay-per-view. There you go. 135. Which was like their first, to your point, was their first division. That's Ronda's division. That's Amanda's, first championship. That's Amanda Nunes' first championship division. So look, Rocky Pennington's been around a minute. If she ends up becoming champion, that's a cool story. But yeah, I actually don't think you're wrong on that, man. Between, Rose and I don't really know who you look. Tatiana Suarez is maybe like the next one who's got like that potential. Mackenzie Dern. But I do think that they need a little bit of a spot. With Valentina's struggles, maybe needs a little bit of a kick in the butt for sure.
Maybe get back into the cyborg business. I don't know. She announced that she's actually boxing earlier today in her next matchup. Let's get back to Islam real quick. After seeing Islam demolish Charles Oliveira and head kick frickin' Alexander Volkanovski, I'm back on the other side that I actually think the Khabib comparisons are really fair. And when it's all said and done, I think we might look back and say Volk was even better than Khabib. I can't believe I'm saying this. I wouldn't have said this 6 months ago, but he's shown me a lot, man. You're going to fight me if I say when it's all said and done, we look at Islam as a better fighter than Khabib.
It's tough because I think he's got a tough road to hoe as far as resume is concerned, because I do think a lot of the guys that Khabib took out and the heightenedness of the Conor rivalry, I think it's going to be tough for a lot of people to shake that in Islam's eyes.
Best wins though. What are we talking? We're talking Conor,
Gaethje, Poirier, Conor. Those are his best ones.
And then the win versus Al at the time, because he was kind of climbing up the ranks. And then you look at taking out Charles Oliveira, Islam was able to do that the way that he did it. Kicking Volkanovski in the head. Man, I think his resume is getting there.
It might. I just think that, it's interesting because they did have, similar, slow rolls to the title because, Khabib was dealing with the injury stuff. Then he had the weight cutting issue with Tony Ferguson. And so it took him a little bit to get into that title picture. Whereas Islam, was supposed to take on Beneil, and then there was the Bobby Green fight, and then all of a sudden, boom, he's fighting for the title. But yeah, I do think that for people to, there's something about like aura and the meaningfulness of rivalries. I don't know who that Conor McGregor is going to be for him, because like you could probably argue that Conor's maybe one of the weaker wins on Khabib's resume, but it means the most because everybody remembers it. It just is like one of those that like the bus, the hate, all that stuff, it just is going to live in infamy. So I don't know what Islam's going to be able to have to mean that.
Somebody will come along in the next couple of years and we'll start talking about them, and then Islam will take that guy out. Then again, Islam's talking about retirement, so who knows how long he's going to hang around. Maybe he just gets out like Khabib did. That's Brendan. I'm the Sports Machine. Coming up next, don't go anywhere. It's time to make some money. I've got the odds for you on UFC 295, the main event. Alex Pereira versus Yuri Prochazka. I feel really strongly about how that one's going down, and I like a lot of these bets. Let's make some money together on the other side. It's Tapped Out.
We're back with more Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
What's good in your neighborhood? We appreciate you checking us out. It is Tapped Out. That's Brendan Tobin. I'm the Sports Machine, Sean Levine. Let's do some method of the madness for UFC 295. Who's going to win these fights and how it's going down. Time to make some money. Right now at BetMGM, here's your odds on the main event. Alex Pereira is the slight favorite, -125 versus Yuri Prochazka at +105. BT, how are we making money on this one Saturday night?
Man, the only thing that gives me concern with Yuri is obviously coming off of the injury, but I like him as a dog in this one. Like, I think that he is more well-rounded. I think that he has shown, the ultimate championship heart in his fight against Glover Teixeira. I get it. Alex Pereira is an absolute hammer and can hit some vicious stuff. But as we've seen, like, he has a little bit of toughness with the elusiveness, the guys who are a little bit unorthodox. We saw this in the Israel Adesanya rivalry. And yes, eventually he did get to Izzy in one of his spots, and all he needs is one. But I just think that Yuri is got so many different methods, so many different ways to go about it and win a fight. I like him as an underdog in this fight. I just think there's value in it. The only concern for me is like, how is he coming off of this shoulder injury? How bad was it? Because a lot of the times, our guys is confident throwing it, but I think he's going to be okay. I think that he's got so many weapons at his disposal that he'll be okay through this fight. And I'm a little honestly surprised that he is the underdog, to be real with you, man. I like Yuri in this fight, and I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win by knockout. I
like active versus inactive a lot. And Alex Pereira has been a really active fighter at a lot of different weight classes. Since he's switched over to the UFC, we've seen him every few months, kind of like Izzy was for a long time. In the case of Prochazka, he's coming off an injury. Haven't seen him in the octagon in over a year at this point. So all those things concern me a little bit, which is why I lean a little bit toward the favorite at -125. I agree with your previous statement. I figured this would be a pick'em, right? This is like a classic pick'em fight because we don't know a lot of stuff about both these guys still. And right now you can get plus money on Yuri Prochazka. The thing I agree with you the most on, and this is where my money's going, the fight's going to end in a knockout. I don't know who's knocking out who. So I'm looking at BetMGM right now, and you don't get a ton of money on it. It's like -200, -220. They think the fight's probably going to end in a knockout. I'm cool with that. You get a full 5 rounds. Somebody's ass is getting knocked out. I'm willing to pay that money.
Yeah, I think for sure this one, if it goes the distance, would be pretty surprising. Honestly, for this and the co-main event, I think that both of these, I think that both all 4 parties in these main and co-main events know that like this is their shot. They're headlining on a monster card that obviously lost this great GOAT showdown, so they have a chance to really make their mark at a big time historic building. And I think that they're both, you do not have there's not a boring fighter amongst the 4 of them. So I think that finishing this inside the distance is a pretty safe bet. I think so. That's probably the way it's going to go.
This really has, kind of to your point, turned into a fight fans card where if you're just kind of a common fan, right? Like if you're my girlfriend who looks over my shoulder and goes, oh, there's Max Holloway, she knows those guys. Maybe she doesn't know Sergey Pavlovich or even Tom Aspinall. Yuri Prochazka, maybe not a household name just yet. In the case of Pereira, he's only been here for 5 minutes. But I actually look at the co-main event, Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich, as a better fight than what we were supposed to get. Now, I'm not saying I would have been looking forward. We were supposed to get, obviously, John Jones versus Stipe Miocic, and I would have really looking forward to that. And I think it would have been really fun. But I'm also pretty sure I know how it's going to finish, the same way that BetMGM told me it was, which is John Jones is going to finish this guy. This is a much more even fight, Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich. Where's your money going?
Such a tough pick, man. I just want to say this. This is one of those where I'm just like, I'm going to give you guys an answer now, but this is one where I'd be waffling on it back and forth. I'm going to lean Pavlovich just because I saw him in person and I'm like, that's the scariest dude on the planet. But I really feel strongly about this. He has to beat Tom Aspinall in the first round. I feel like he has to get it done. Now, I think he can do it because he's a monster. But the longer the fight goes, if you feel like Tom Aspinall can survive the storm, and the odds will tell you it won't, like, I think it's like 7 plus 750, something like that, for the fight to go the distance. Like, nobody thinks this fight's going the distance. A lot of most heavyweight fights don't go the distance. But I just think that Pavlovich he's got that special scary power. I don't think he's going to take his time. I think he is going to go after Tom Aspinall like a buzzsaw, and I think he'll get it done. I think he has to get it done in one. If he doesn't, and you see Tom Aspinall still standing, maybe go and live bet it and go with Aspinall in that case. But Aspinall's got more tools. He's probably cleaner as a boxer. He's probably cleaner as far as all skills are concerned. I'm just going with the powerhouse, and I think the powerhouse is going to get it done because it's heavyweights, and that's the way I think it's going to go. But I know, as you, the card-carrying member of Tom Aspinallville, whatever city you guys have, like, nobody has had their flag planted on Tom Aspinall. You have since we've started this show for 2 years. So I can't imagine you're going against it now.
No, I'm going with Tom Aspinall, and at minus 115, it's going to go off as essentially a pick 'em at BetMGM. So I'm not too worried about the odds. It's just who I think is going to end up winning the fight. Everything you said is true. Pavlovich has more power. I think every fight he's been in has been done in one. Maybe he had a fight that went 2 rounds. Same thing with Tom Aspinall. That's what I'm looking at right now, is not necessarily who wins the fight, because I'm taking Aspinall, but what round does it finish in? Essentially, at BetMGM, it's like even money for it to finish in one. Both these guys, I think, have enough of a gas tank if it does go 2 or 3 to hang around. But I also think what you said about them trying to finish the other guy is absolutely true. The one thing we haven't talked about is Aspinall is coming in off of an injury not too long ago as well. And, if we want to talk about Yuri Prohashkin, I haven't seen him in a while coming in off an injury. You could say a lot of the same things about Tom Aspinall. So I think this is a very, very interesting fight. I think it's going to go off at even money. Somebody's getting their ass knocked out in one.
Now, you like to sometimes get in there and you like to get into, wacky finishes on things from time to time. Like,
I do.
Do you have anything? Like, I think Aspinall is somewhere like around, it's like 350 plus 350 or something like that for submission. Like, we've seen him. He's got some jiu-jitsu to his game. Like, if he does, we saw him submit Alexander Volkov, Andrei Arlovsky.
There you go.
So he goes into that bag of tricks. Do you like him doing it like that, or do you think the finish is going to be by knockout if he finishes Pavlovich?
Yeah, I think this is a fight that generally stays on its feet. I think the Pavlovich starts throwing wild, like you said, early, going for the knockout. Same thing he has in every fight. Walks to the middle of that octagon, puts his head down, and starts throwing haymakers, tries to knock the guy out. Aspinall is a very crisp boxer. He's got great head movement for a guy that's that big. He kind of fights more like a welterweight, if you will.
He's probably the more polished version of what people thought Ciryl Gane was going to be.
Absolutely.
I think that he's just a little bit better at everything. Maybe doesn't look as much like a physical freak as Ciryl does, but I think that he's a little bit more polished at all of that stuff. He's really good. And I don't feel great picking against him. Great dude. I just, Pavlovich, dude. I mean, that's my argument is just giant Russian. He's so scary. But
here's the thing. Those guys that Pavlovich was knocking out, no disrespect to any of them, right? All great fighters, big ass dudes, some champions. Aspinall not only is a better boxer who's got better head movement, a better defense, he's faster. much faster. And I think he uses all
He's got
those
very
things.
fast hands.
I think he uses all that to his advantage, BT. And I think that's why he wins the fight. I think he knocks him out. And you asked me if I have any of my fun kind of goofy bets. Yeah, I sprinkled a little bit that he finishes him in the first 30 seconds. Only because I think you get 15-1 on it, $10, maybe he comes out. Because I do think that somebody's going to connect early on in this fight. We know that both guys ultimately had the power to knock out the other one. So I think it sounds like we both agree this fight's not going too long.
No, I don't. I mean, if you wanted to make arguments for Pavlovich, you could say that like the last three guys he'd beat are definitely more well known. He's beat Blades, he beat Tai Tuivasa. Was cage side for that. I haven't told you that. Derek Lewis, he's beaten.
Stuck in the mud, though. All those guys are stuck in the mud. That's not true. Tom Aspinall.
I understand. They are very, very different fighters. Tom beaten Tybura after he, of course, had the loss to Curtis Blades with his knee injury. Beat Volkov, beat Spivak, beat Orlovsky. So beat some very solid guys in the division. Probably not as well known as Pavlovich, but yes, he's got a lot more versatility than the best wins of Pavlovich. Outside, I would say probably of Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades obviously has a lot in his bag of tricks, but he steamrolled them.
After Bruce announces their names is when we're going to get really excited for this one. It's like, oh my God, these guys are about to start down against each other.
Do you think do you think either one of them, if they have a performance, do you think either one of them will garner the respect to get John Jones to fight them? Or do you think that there's no shot we ever see Johnny? Because I don't think John Jones will fight Sergey Pavlovich ever. But if Tom Aspinall wins, I can almost see, because I could see a huge London card bringing the GOAT in. How crazy those fans are. If you had to guess, the UFC wanted somebody to come out of this. Aspinall seems like the guy, because I feel like it's more realistic they could get John Jones to fight him as opposed to Pavlovich.
And like you said, you get that over the seas crowd that they've been looking for really since Conor McGregor. They tried to get with Darren Till. They pretended with Paddy Pimblett. This is the dude. It's weird that we kind of agree, and it sounds like the public does, that John Jones doesn't want anything to do with Sergey Pavlovich. Be honest with me. Do you think it's more because of his legacy? Because he's like, this guy's name's not big enough? Or because he's like, I'm getting kind of old. This guy's kind of young. And if he knocks out Tom Aspinall, he might do the same thing to me. I don't want to say here on, national radio and on YouTube on the Odyssey app that John Jones is scared of anybody. But let me say this publicly. If he would be scared of anybody, it would be Sergey Pavlovich.
Yeah, I don't think it's scared. It's like, what does he have to gain from beating Sergey Pavlovich? That's I think really what it comes down to, is his legacy is set. He's done everything there is to do. Do I really have to go try and beat this Russian monster who's not going to promote the fight? I have to go and get on that. Whereas Aspinall there's a little pizzazz to. I don't know if John's ever done a London fight before. I don't think he has. That comes to mind. So there's always that element to it. I think he's going to have a real hero's welcome, even though Aspinall is going to be their guy. I think they have such a love for the sport that I feel like that would mean a lot to John to do that. And I'm running through his wiki right now.
At that point, though, dude, you came back as a heavyweight. You fought Cyril Gahn, who really, isn't that big of a name. I don't think he's going to go down as an all-time great fighter by any means. And then if you either hang him up or you fight Sergey Pavlovich or Tom Aspinall, it's kind of like, well, was that really worth it? Or could you have just gone down as the greatest light heavyweight of all time? But that is a story of John Jones, and it continues. All right, let's roll our way down this card. I wonder how you're betting these. Pat Sabatini versus Diego Lopez. Lopez, even money. Sabatini is the favorite at -120. Where's your money going?
I'm going to go Sabatini winning this fight. I like Sabatini getting this by submission, which is touching, brushing around 3-1 on this one. So that's where I'm going to go with this one. What about you?
I hate agreeing with you, but I think Sabatini chokes him out in the second round specifically, even though I do like Diego Lopez. He's a violent fighter. Mackenzie Dern, great BJJ versus Jessica Andrade. Andrade right now, the dog at +165. Mackenzie Dern getting a lot of love right now. Must be getting a lot of bets too at BetMGM. -200. Are you willing to pay that?
I'm going to go with her winning by submission in this one. I just think that we've seen Andrade get in a little bit of hard luck lately, and I don't know if that's just age catching up with her. I don't know if that's all the different weight classes that she has been through. But Jessica Andrade has kind of done it all seen it all, but it feels very much like the young bloods. I mean, she's lost to Blanchfield, Tatiana Suarez, so like it feels like the sport's kind of catching up with her a little bit. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just it happens to the men all the time. Like you just like all of a sudden the young killers are getting you. And I think especially her size, 32 is not very old, but when you're that size as a woman, usually they age a little bit faster, just like it is with boxers. Usually a lot of times smaller boxers age a lot faster too. So I do think that Mackenzie Dern deserves to be the favorite, and I like her by sub in this one.
I think that's going to get a lot of money on Saturday night on BetMGM. People know how good she is on the ground, which is why I'm going to take the exact opposite. Give me Jessica Andrade by knockout. Ooh. You can get 4-1 at BetMGM. Also on the main card, Benoit St. Denis versus Matt the Steamroller Frivola, the underdog. He'll be 2-1 on Saturday night. And Jared Flash Gordon -200 taking on fan favorite Mark O. Madsen. What do you got?
Rivola's an underdog, 3 straight wins for the Steamroller right now. I know, man. Like I'm going with that as I think that's great value in that. You can't tell me he can't finish Benoit. Come on, man.
Of course he can. And like you point out, he's going for 4 wins in a row, an underdog in the last 3. Let's get paid on Saturday night. All right, before we get out of here, one final segment. I've got my UFC 300 dream card with odds. I think you're going to like it right here on Tapped Out.
We're back with more Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
Final segment of Tapped Out. We appreciate you checking us out on YouTube, on the Odyssey app. Brendan Tobin, myself, the sports machine Sean Levine, and you. Coming up in probably 4 or 5 months, UFC 300. It's crazy that we're already talking about it, but at this point, if you weren't with us earlier on in the show, we know what UFC 295 is going to be. Main event, Alex Pereira versus Jori Prochazka. 296, Leon versus Colby. 297, Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. 298, Volkanovski versus Ilya Topuria. 299's main event will be Sean O'Malley and Chito Vera, which means, dude, they got to start figuring this out, right? Because now they know that essentially O'Malley can't be part of UFC 300 because he's going to be fighting at 299. You could probably say the same thing about Alexander Volkanovski. Throw in John Jones. Don't think he's going to be back in time for UFC 300. So now we have to start throwing out some fights that could actually happen. I took the liberty of doing that. Here they are, and I even made odds. Let's work our way up to my main event. First fight, I got 5 fights on the main card. Sean Strickland, now he has to win versus Dricus du Plessis for this to happen as champion. Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya 2, and I'll give you a pick 'em.
I think I'd go with Israel Adesanya. I think I'd still pick Izzy to come back and win his belt back. I think we've seen it before. Like he's shown that in rematches he can do better the next time around. I think he's a very smart striker and would figure things out. Maybe my opinion would change after seeing Sean Strickland against Dricus du Plessis. Although I will say, if they are going to have a quick turnaround for the middleweight champion, even having Dricus against Israel, they have a lot of heat together, so that wouldn't be a bad fight either. But I would still go with Izzy. If you're going to give me a pick 'em, even odds, I would go with Stylebender to get his belt back.
And that's why you're my co-matchmaker, because you're right. Even if it is Dricus du Plessis versus Adesanya, everything the same. Although I disagree.
That's your fit. That's kind of crazy though. You got Stylebender to curtain jerk the main card. I can't wait to hear the rest.
Wait, this is juicy stuff. And I think you're gonna like it too. Some South Florida guys on there. I will disagree with you though. I think Strickland beats him again. I'm not saying he whoops his ass like he did last time, but styles make fights, and that one was not close. And you can say that, also fighters have bad nights. Maybe that's what it was. Haven't seen that from Izzy. If we were talking about Tyron Woodley, or if we were talking about somebody else, okay. I was very surprised that it was as one-sided as it is, and I'd like to see it again. Speaking of rematches, working our way up to UFC 300, my main event in a dream world. This fight's also a pick'em. You saw it first at UFC 236, a rematch between Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway.
Oh, I love that fight. I love that fight. I would love to see it again. It was probably Dustin Poirier, one of his best performances of all time. Max Holloway has had. Now, are you having this at this 155? I imagine you're doing this fight, yeah?
Yeah.
And what are the odds? What are you putting it at?
Pick him. Take your guy. Take your guy.
I'm taking Poirier. I'm
And
taking Poirier to get it done.
Holloway, and that's why it's a pick 'em. And I love Holloway in that fight. It's crazy because 236 would be what, 64 pay-per-views before 300 is my math right there. To get that rematch would just be cool, right? To just have two guys that fought that long ago that are still essentially in their prime, the back end for both of them. But I think it's fair to say Holloway and Poirier still in that prime, and we still got 3 fights to go. How about this one? Khamzat Chimaev. You know he had to be on the card.
Mm-hmm.
You know I got him fighting. I have Khamzat as a minus 150 favorite against Bo Nickel at plus 120. We've seen both guys get in there, finish a bunch of guys in one round, ragdoll a bunch of other guys. We've seen both guys with their fists knock out dudes in one round. Bo Nickel at plus 120, Khamzat Chimaev at minus 150.
Man, that would be awesome. I think I'd take Bo. I'd take Bo. I will say though, I wish, I know Bo said that he was after, making his debut and his next fight. I know Bo said that he was taking time. Man, I miss seeing that guy fight. I want to see that guy get scheduled for something soon because I feel like, he's got to keep riding that juice. All of his fights are super fast anyway. Love to get the hype train of Bo Nickel going back because he feels like he could be a superstar in this fight in this sport for sure. But like we've learned with Khamzat, like staying active is important when you're on that rise, and especially when you're that dominant. I'd pick him though. I mean, what about you? Would you ride with Khamzat?
No, I think Khamzat's human. I think we've seen that in his last couple of fights. And Usman's great and Gilbert's great, but I mean, if he was the guy that he was made out to be, he would have finished both those guys, and he did not. So I think that Bo Nickel wins that fight. I think it would be incredibly fun to see if they decide to take it to the ground or stand up, right? When you get two wrestlers, most of the time that ends up in a stand-up fight. If you get any plus money on Bo Nickel, it's hard not to take it at plus 120. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a fight that a lot of people would love to see. And for the record, I think Bo Nickel agrees with you. He wants to get back in the octagon. He wants to fight often. It's the UFC that has kept him away from fights and not gave him fights that he's wanted more so. So maybe they're waiting on this. I'm not saying this specific fight, which would get both of us excited, but Bo Nickel could fight at UFC 300. I think that's realistic.
Well, it was interesting to see that Khamzat wasn't the pick for Strickland. It seemed like after the Kamaru Usman fight, that seemed like the natural place they were going to go.
Yeah.
So they've swerved us a couple times at middleweight because we all thought DDP. I mean, they thought that he was going to fight Izzy, and it ended up being Strickland. So it's that division's got a little bit of weirdness to it, but the only thing is, I wonder if Khamzat takes the fight. I wonder if Khamzat thinks to himself, like, what do I gain out of beating Bo Nickel because he's so green? Whereas, like, if you're Bo, you win that fight, it just feels like you're like on legend status already if you take out Khamzat.
No, that's a good point because name-wise, people don't know Bo Nickel the same way they know even Gilbert Burns or certainly Kamaru Usman or even like Kevin Holland. If you think about the guys that Boris has fought, Khamzat Chimaev. So I'd love to see it. I think Bo Nickel would love to take the fight because you want to talk about rising up in people's eyes and popularity. You take out the monster that is Khamzat Chimaev, you get everything that he had earned. All right, we've worked our way up to the co-main event of my dream UFC 300 card. Islam Makhachev is a minus 280 favorite against the BMF. Justin Gaethje plus 200. Gaethje versus Islam. Gaethje plus 200. Islam minus 280.
I think I'm taking Gaethje just because the odds. I think that he obviously, the Khabib storyline is going to be impossible to not think about because that was Khabib's last fight, probably his most dominant performance. Gaethje just looked like he wasn't ready for the prime time, but I do think that this guy has gotten better. I think he's been super hungry. And I do think that we've seen with Islam, like he's not quite the guy who wants to immediately go to the ground game. Like he likes to mix it up a little bit. He likes to be on the feet. And I think that's dangerous against a guy like Justin Gaethje. Gaethje loves kicking those legs, which, could lead to trouble of him getting taken down, I guess. But I don't know, man. He's got puncher's chance for me, so I think I'd go with Gaethje if you give me plus 200 on him.
I don't know. Islam's got that kicker's chance. Just ask Alexander Volkanovski. I mean, he almost kicked his head right off his body. I didn't think it was possible. And our main event, I build it up like there's a drum roll behind me or something like that. I think you probably could have figured this one out. I appreciate that. Michael Chandler versus Conor McGregor. And for the record, I think this is probably the one that's most likely out of all these dream fights to actually happen. And frankly, I'd personally, as a fight fan, rather see one of these other fights as the main event. But if they get Conor to come back and he fights Chandler, he's obviously going to be in the main event because he's Conor McGregor. Even money, you can take either guy.
Wow.
You know who you're taking. I mean, the pause is cool for like effect, but you know you're putting your money on Conor McGregor. So just say Conor.
Oh, you thought that was where I was going. I thought you were going to say I was obviously going to take Michael Chandler.
No, I know where you're going.
What do you think? What do you have a weight class for this? I'm still curious about that. Are we doing this at welterweight? Are we doing this? It's got to be welterweight, right?
Whatever Conor McGregor, depending on how large he is, and decides on the fight. That's basically what it's going to come down to. And I think Chandler's cool with that.
I think he is
around pretty big.
He does, but I do think that there's, at welterweight, I think now it's interesting because the bigger Conor's fought, the less special he's been. It's usually outside of, I think, the the Cowboys Cerrone fight where Cowboys basically said I was ready to be out of there, shoulder strike and all. Man, but his record's not that good. But I love Michael Chandler. I'm gonna go with Michael Chandler just because I don't know what the hell we're gonna get from Conor McGregor. It just feels, if you're giving me pick 'em, just feels safer place to put my money. I've seen Chandler be in competitive fights, even if he hasn't necessarily won. He's been in Fight of the Year candidates. We've seen him have vicious knockouts against Tony Ferguson. We saw him have very competitive rounds against Dustin Poirier. So it's rare that Michael Chandler has a fight where he doesn't have a moment where it looks like he's going to pull out the win, which is typical for his career. He usually will have moments. It's just a matter of, can he finish through? Can he follow through? Can he get the win in that way? It's just so hard to put your money on. And I know a lot of people are going to bet on Conor because he's Conor, but he hasn't fought in forever. He hasn't won in forever. And he broke his leg the last time he fought. So unless you're coming from like an Irish area code, and I don't even was your country code, I don't know. I don't know why you would bet on Conor McGregor, because too many X factors, dude. Like how can you have faith that he's going to get it done?
No country code here. 816 is the area code in Kansas City, home of the Super Bowl champions. And I
appreciate you not mentioning last week, by the way. It's very classy of you.
Well, the show's not over. We've got like a minute left. Were you referring to when the Chiefs beat the Dolphins? Because look,
I thought you were going to start the show with it.
No. I'm not that kind of guy. I end the show on this kind of stuff. I'm petty, so then I can just get out of here. Are the Dolphins, are we sure they're on the same level as Kansas City? Are they the next best thing? Because I thought they got a little bit exposed over in Germany, my guy.
I think the thing that's frustrating for a lot of Dolphin fans is that I think that in these matchups against the good teams,
that's right,
I don't feel like they are outclassed. Now, the thing that's been annoying is they get down 2 scores to all these teams, and they always feel like they got to punch back. But do they look like they're ready to contend yet? I think those questions are very valid. And for, Tua, who I love, I've been a Tua guy, you know that. That was a bad last drive from him. In the Eagles game, he had a chance to tie. He threw a pick, even though the refereeing was very shaky in that fight. So I do think that to say that they're quite ready for that stuff, I don't think it's necessarily a talent gap, but there are some things they just got to work on execution to get better. But, that's why I always say, for people who say oh, Kansas City, you're going to write them off. I say that's stupid. They've, 5 in a row. You can't write off a team that just has that kind of pedigree. It's just like the Patriots. You couldn't do that. And I do think that the coach and the team has had that good attitude about it, but it was frustrating, man. I thought that they were going to come back and tie that thing for sure.
I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass because you're my guy. I think they play again, and I think they play in the AFC Championship game in Kansas City. I think that you look at around some of these other teams. Baltimore's good. Chiefs have their number. The Bills, if they make the playoffs, obviously they've got a lot of talent. Chiefs have their number. I think that Cincinnati, maybe you could say they're starting to win some football games.
Yeah.
I still think it's Kansas City, then Miami next, but it's definitely getting interesting. And that is it for Tapped Out. I wasn't even going to talk a little football until you brought it up. So
I couldn't chicken out. You got to let you peacock a little.
Appreciate it. Appreciate that. That is Brendan Tobin for our producer, Jake Noaker. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Tap.